Hello everybody, this is just a quick video to show you another way of making a room finish schedule that's a little bit more in line with the requirements of your studio project. So to start off, I'm just going to create a few rooms that we can go ahead and schedule the finishes of. So just drop in some walls here and then divide them into individual spaces. So now that I have this, I'm just going to go ahead and place some room objects into each of the spaces. So from the architecture tab, we're just going to click on room, and then we're going to place one room within each of these four spaces, like that. Now that I have the rooms in there, I'm just going to go ahead and rename these to something that makes a little bit more sense. So you want to hover over the edge of the wall and then hit tab a couple times until you get to the actual room object. And then you can go in here and you can change the numbering. So I'm going to call this one 100. This one is going to be 101. Third one will be 102. And then the last one we're going to call 103. Okay, so now that I have that, I can go ahead and I can start focusing on actually scheduling the finishes that I want to go into these spaces. All right, so if you watched my previous videos on how to do this, we went ahead and we used the identity data parameters within the room object itself to go ahead and start scheduling the finishes for each space. And we're going to use that in this case too, but in this situation we're going to do it a little bit differently. Okay, so one way that we can go ahead and think about this is we can think about rooms that are similar in terms of usage. So bathrooms, for example, or offices, for example. A lot of the times when you're going to be designing these spaces, you'll probably have the consistent finishes throughout each space that is similar. So each bathroom is probably going to have the same flooring finish, or it might have the same wall finishes in the same places. So in order to quickly create these schedules, we can start thinking about the different types of rooms, and then we can build our schedule with that in mind, and that'll kind of simplify things. So what we're going to do first is we're going to add in some additional custom parameters here. So by default, the room object comes with a single wall finish parameter, and usually that is not sufficient to describe all the finishes that could be within the space on the walls, right? So it's very common to have maybe a wall that is painted one color as an accent wall, and then maybe the other three walls in the space are, something totally different. And just with one parameter here for wall finish, we can't really get the level of granularity that we need to explain that in the schedule. Okay, so we're going to kind of forget about this finish here, and we're going to add in a few finishes of our own based on the north wall finish, south wall finish, east wall finish, and west wall finish. So to do that, we're going to take advantage of project parameters. Okay, and this is something that has been covered in my prior videos if you've watched those. Basically, project parameters allow us to add in things that are not built into Revit by default. So anything in here we can add to this list and make something that fits our needs a little bit better. So to access the project parameters, we're going to go to the Manage tab. Then we're going to go to the Project Parameters section. Okay, so in here, by default, you're just going to have Occupant as the only project parameter. So we're going to create some new ones. So you just want to click on the New Parameter button here. Now, this window that pops up here is very similar to the parameter windows that we've been used to in the past, for example, family creation. The only difference is on the right side here, we get access to the category that we want to tie this parameter to. And because this is concerning rooms, right, we're going to add to the room object, and we want our parameter to appear here in this list when we select a room. We're going to find rooms in this categories list, and we're going to check it. So I'm just going to scroll down until I get to rooms, and I'm going to check that on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to name this wall finish, and this one will be north. Okay, so we're going to do one for each cardinal direction. So I'm just going to copy this so that it goes a little bit faster. Copy that to my clipboard. And now we want to set that to be an instance parameter so that we have individual control over every room in the project. If this was a type, it would change that parameter value for every single room throughout the project, and you wouldn't be able to customize it room by room. So leave it on instance, and then type parameter. This is just going to be a text parameter, and then we're going to group this under this section right here. So you can see all these are under identity data, so we're going to match that. So I can hit I on my keyboard. That's going to take me to identity data. Click on it, and then click OK, and that's going to add that in. So when I click ahead, or if I would go ahead and I would say OK, you would see that then pop up over here when I reselect the room. So now I see wall finish north. All right, and we're just going to add all the other cardinal directions in here now. So going back to the project parameters under manage and then project parameters, we're just going to create the rest of them. So wall, well, I can paste this. So this one is going to be south. We're going to set that to be a text parameter, and then we're going to set this to identity data. Then we're just going to find rooms over here in our list, like that, and then we're going to click OK, and then we're just going to add the other two. Wall finish east. It's going to be a text under identity data, and then we're going to find rooms again. And then one more time for west. It's going to be text again, identity data, and then rooms. Okay, so now if I were to select this room object again, you can see all of those are appearing here. And this is what we're going to use instead of this wall finish parameter that's already in here. So you can kind of just ignore that. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to be able to apply finishes to all of my room objects throughout the project very quickly. And like I said, the way that I'm going to do that is by categorizing the rooms based on their usage. Okay, so for example, maybe these two rooms are going to be restrooms. Whoops, don't want to do that. Restroom. Actually, let's call this one like men's restroom, okay? This one will be women's. And then let's make these two offices. Okay, just like that. So we have two restrooms and we have two offices. So that's how I'm breaking these apart, is just by their use case. Okay, so we're going to take advantage of a tool in the Revit project environment called a global parameter. And basically what a global parameter is it's an area where you can kind of define general parameters within your project, and then you can link individual components to that. Okay, so that's not a great explanation, but it'll make sense here in a minute when I show you. So if you go to manage and you go to project parameters, not project parameters, global parameters. We go to global parameters. Right now there is nothing in here. But what we can do is we can set up, just think of this as a central place where you can kind of control all your finishes for these rooms, okay? So in here, we can set up finishes based on the use case. So I'm going to call this first parameter restroom walls north, okay? This is going to be a text parameter, and this is going to be grouped under not identity data. Let's group this one under materials and finishes, and then I'll copy that. Okay? And that's going to add that there. Now, let's do that for the other ones. So, south, text, materials and finishes. Okay, and adding these in here for each one is kind of annoying, but it will save you a lot of time when you go to making your schedule, especially if you have a ton of rooms in your project. Setting up all these parameters ahead of time is just really going to speed up the process, so you're not doing a bunch of stuff manually. And that's kind of the idea of using these global parameters, is saving you time and not a bunch of manual rework. So let's do east. This is going to be a text. This is going to be under materials and finishes. And then the last one, this will be west. This is going to be text again, and materials and finishes. Okay. Now, I did that for bathrooms. Now I'm going to have to do that for every other type of room that is in my project. So in this case, we're going to do it again for offices. And this is what I mean. You can get a lot of parameters in here, and it's kind of annoying to set up, but just bear with me. So we're going to call this one offices north, text, materials and finishes, office walls south, text, materials and finishes. I'm going to rename that. Okay, office walls east. It's going to be a text, materials and finishes, office walls west, text, materials and finishes. Okay, so I have 8 global parameters in here now. So now that we've done that, we can start assigning values. So let's say maybe I have 4 different paints that I have selected for this project, and I want every north-facing restroom wall to be P1, and then I want every south, east, and west-facing wall to be P2. Okay, so we'll put P2. Okay, so now let's say for the offices, every north wall is going to be P3, and then every south, east, and west wall is going to be P4. All right, so paint 1, paint 2, paint 3, paint 4. Click apply, click OK. Now what we have to do is we have to link what we just did to the values that are tied to our rooms, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my rooms based on use case. So we're just going to select every restroom, which would be these 2. And then we're going to scroll down here in the parameters. And if you remember back to when we created custom families, we associated parameters together. So basically we tied one to the other. And that's what we're going to do here too with this associate global parameter button. So I can tell any of these finishes to point to a value within a global parameter. So for north, for example, I'm going to do restroom walls north. Okay, and you can see it pulls in that P1. Then we're just going to do it for all the others. So restroom walls south, restroom walls east, and restroom walls west. Okay, so that's going to make the 2 of these the same, right? So if I just clicked on one of them individually, I get those values there, and then I get the same values here. That's great for if you have perfect consistency across all restrooms in the project. Let's say, though, you want to make a slight change to one of these restroom finishes, and maybe one of the north walls is a different paint than P1. In that case, you would just not link that parameter. So I can click on this again, and I can say none. And now I can just set this to any value I want. So let's say I want P3 for this one, right? So that's not tied to it, and I can override this now, and I can customize it, but then I can leave all the others pulling that data from the global parameter. So then we're just going to do the same thing for the offices. Select both of the offices. Wall finish north, that is going to be linked to office walls north. Wall finish south is going to be office walls south. Wall finish east is going to be office walls east, and then wall finish west is going to be office walls west. Okay, and that's just going to pull in all that data there. And again, if you want to make a custom modification to one of these, just unlink the parameter like that, none, and then you're going to type in whatever you want. So let's do P2 for the east wall in this case, right? Okay, so we have assigned all of our finishes to our walls, which is great. Next, what we need to do is we need to create our schedule. Okay, so to create the schedule, you just go to View, and then Schedules, Schedule Quantities. So now what we're going to pull in is we're going to set this to be a room schedule. Okay, so under category, we're going to find rooms. And we're going to call this a room finish schedule. And then that's fine as it is. So we'll click OK. And now this is where we define the columns that go in the schedule. So if I'm looking at the requirements for your studio schedule that they provided to you in the project brief, we're going to start out by indicating the room number. So I'm going to find number. I'm going to pull that over. Next one is going to be room name. So we're going to click on name, pull that over. Next one is going to be floor finish. So we're going to find floor finish, pull that over. Then we're going to do the base finish for the walls. So we're going to find base finish, pull that over there. Then we're going to do our custom parameters that we set up. So those are going to be our wall finishes, starting with north, and then east, and then south, and then west. Okay, and then we're going to do ceiling. So we're going to find ceiling finish. We're going to pull that over. And then lastly is notes. So I'm going to find the comments, and I'm going to pull comments over. Okay, so that should align with what you're required for your layout in terms of your studio assignment. So we're going to click on OK. And then that's going to set up our schedule for us. And then what we can do is we can customize the names of these. So if there's a specific naming scheme, we can set that. So for example, on your example one that they gave you, this is room number, and then we have room name, and then we have just floor. You could leave that as floor, you could do floor finish, and then wall base. And then for these, you can just call them the cardinal directions. So N and E and S. And then west. And then this one, we're just going to call this ceiling. And then comments, we'll call notes. Okay, so now that these are in here, maybe I'll make this all caps. Room finish, schedule, and I can align that horizontally to the left like they do in their example. And then we can go ahead and we can group these headers together. So if I click here, if I hover my mouse over wall base and then I click and drag to the right, I can select multiple of these headers right here. So I want to select all 4 of these cardinal directions and then release. Then I get this button here for group. And that's going to create a little header over top of all of them and group the ones together. So now I can call this partitions. Partitions like that. And we're going to make sure that is centered. Whoops, I did one too many. So I didn't want to put wall base in there. So let's ungroup that. Let's start here at N and drag to the right. And even though that's not highlighted, I suppose it is. There we go. So now we'll call this partitions. Just like that. Do all caps. And then, yeah, so if there were more that you need to group together, you could group it that way. Now, they show on the example a ceiling height. That is a value that you cannot pull in from Revit to your schedule. So I would talk to the studio instructors and see if that is actually required and to be on the finished schedule and not just noted on a reflected ceiling plan. Because the way that we want to use Revit is we want to have the schedule pull in that data for us automatically. You could set up a custom parameter here for a text where you could type in the ceiling height manually, but we want to kind of avoid that if we can. So I would check with your studio instructor to see if ceiling height is actually an important requirement to have on this finish schedule. And if it is, if you actually had to do that, you could come here to fields and you could set up a new field. So you could call this one ceiling height. We'll make this a text parameter. We can just leave that under text. Should be fine. I'll click OK. And then that's going to add that there. And then we can move our column. If I go back to fields, let's move this before ceiling finish. And then you could group the two of these together like that. And you could call that ceiling. And then call this one MTL like they show in their example. And then you can type a ceiling height here. Like I said, I would avoid doing it that way just because that's it doesn't take advantage of Revit's automatic filling in capabilities. We don't want to be typing things in manually like this if we can avoid it, because let's say you're on a real project and you had to make changes to something. You have to then catch that change everywhere. So if I made a change to the model and I changed the ceiling height, that would not automatically be reflected here in my schedule, okay? So kind of the purpose of Revit is, and it's actually in the name Revit, so the REV is for revision. If I make a change to something, it's automatically going to change that everywhere, okay? So you want to avoid manually typing values if you can. It's kind of my point. But anyway, so now that we have this, if you want to add in the floor and wall-based finishes, you can do the same thing in terms of your global parameters. So if I pulled up my global parameters window again, you could add in a office floor finish, right? And you don't have to do as many now because there's not cardinal directions associated with the floor finish. And then we can set that to be text again. And we can group this under materials and finishes. Like that. And then let's call this like CPT1. Okay. Now, if I went back to my floor plan, and this is going to be set up on a finish plan, right? Not just a regular floor plan in your case. We can click on my offices. And I can tie my floor finish parameter to my office floor finish like that. It's going to pull in CPT1. Then I go back to my room finish schedule and it auto populates that for me, which is kind of the point. Now, the cool thing is, because I linked all these parameters together, let's say I need to make some kind of a change to how this is set up. So if I went to my global parameters again, let's say, you know what, I decided that for my restroom walls north, I don't actually want to use PT1 for that. I want to use PT3. Well, now you just have to control that in one spot, right? I'll just say PT3, click apply, and watch the schedule. It's going to update that for me automatically, which is really cool. So if I had like a bunch of rooms in the schedule, instead of me going in here manually and clicking and typing a value and then changing that in every single spot for every single room, I've now eliminated a bunch of rework, right? Because I have tied it all to a single spot, and then I can just control it there under global parameters, and I can override that all at one time. So that's kind of the power of linking parameters together, creating your own project parameters, tying them to a global parameter, so that this window here is the only thing that you have to worry about. Okay. So then you can just go ahead and you can fill in the rest of these based on whatever you need for floor or wall and then ceiling. And it's a pretty simple way of doing it. So hopefully that helps you out with your schedule requirements for the specific studio project. And if you need anything else, please let me or your other studio instructors know, and I can address them.